In the end, the Philippines is also living under a climate of fear and violence. In
Wow, let me cut you there. Wow, that's so bad. Hey, hello, and ngayon naman, I just like to do my video reaction dun sa naging interview ng BBC HARDTALK hosted by Stephen HACKUR to Miss Maria Ressa. Okay, let's watch this and see how she answered the questions. And for me, in my personal opinion, this was a very good interview. Okay, let's go ahead and watch it.
Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen SACKUR. No one better epitomizes the strongman style of political leadership than President Rodrigo Duterte of the Philippines. He has a visceral dislike of independent journalism, and no one knows that better than my guest today, Maria Ressa, founder of the Rappler online.
Let me just cut him there. So I want you guys to understand that Stephen is the host, and as a producer of a show, whoever is controversial, you need to invite and uh, do the interview because syempre, yan yung panonoodin ng mga tao. So let's not hate him. Yung mga sinabi niya kanina na si Duterte hates individual journalism. It's just his introduction to catch your attention. Okay, so that's a form of what do you call this? It's a form of attracting you through the introduction para panoorin mo yung show. Okay, let's continue.
News website. Now, she has just been convicted of cyber libel.
Okay, so cyber libel yung kaso niya. Pero alam naman natin kung ano naging reaction ng ibang artista, ng mga ibang against sa government natin, medyo nag-over reaction sila. Diba?
Ressa in Manila, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
Let's start with your personal situation. You have, earlier this month, been convicted on this charge of cyber libel, as they're calling it. Has it changed things for you?
Aside from the emotional roller coaster and the fact that we've crossed yet another divide, I think I'm pretty much on the same road I've been on for the last 4 years, which is really standing up for my rights, both as a Filipino and as a journalist.
You're on bail, and I think your legal team have said there will be an appeal. Do you, in any sense, feel frightened right now?
Stephen, I've gone through this. When you've been under attack for 4 years, as we've been, there have been all these stages. It's like the stages of grief, right? In 2016, we were pummeled on social media.
Okay, so let me just cut her right there kasi masyado na siya maraming sinasabi. The first question, it's just okay. And I think Stephen asked the right question, if she's frightened and how she's feeling now. And I think the second question leaned towards on how she's handling it, that she got bailed. And ngayon sinabi na niya, binalik na niya ulit sa 2016. So as you can see, this is my opinion, okay? So Maria Ressa, she's entitled with her own opinion, and kayo din, ganun din ako. So the question is, sabi, you got sued by a case of cyber what do you call it, reporting or fake news. Hindi niya sinagot yun eh. She didn't even answer it directly. Instead, sinagot niya yung paglaban niya doon sa 2016 year na yon with Duterte. So hinahanap ko yung sagot niya na yon kung bakit siya na nakasuhan. Di ba yung Chinese businessman yung nagkaso sa kanya, hindi naman si President Duterte. Sa totoo lang, yung sinabi niya na yon, and hindi naman talaga lahat ng reporters abusive. Kasi may mga reporters talaga na nagtatanong ng savage questions that they feel that they are more intellectual, they're better than the leaders of this country. Na kung magtanong sila parang hindi na, nagtatanong sila pero pag sumasagot na yung interview nila parang hindi sila nakikinig. Kaya stupid questions din yung mga tanong nila. Sa totoo lang, maraming ganyan. Pero there are reporters that news anchor that I salute and I would like to emulate because they're really good in doing their jobs. Okay?
Aggressive tactics coming from government agencies. We can all see that. But nonetheless, the notion that all sorts of freedom of expression are now curtailed and eliminated in the Philippines surely isn't right. If one looks at your country today, there is still a multitude of diverse opinion across the spectrum of politics.
So, eto, sinasabi ni Stephen dito, Maria, hindi naman pala, wala namang suppression of freedom of expression or journalism in your country kasi ang dami pa rin namang naninira kay Duterte eh. Yun yung ibig sabihin ni Stephen dito. Tinatagalog ko lang. Diba? Meron pa nga gusto siyang ipapatay. Oh my goodness. Diba? I just want to stand on how I feel in my opinion. Okay? Because I love the country so much. I love the Philippines. I'm not gonna say anything negative to the foreigners about our country. So Stephen, go on with your question.
Different platforms on the media, not least Rappler itself. After all, your website hasn't been shut down. It continues to this day. It has millions of eyeballs on it every single month. The Philippines is not North Korea. Nothing.
Sabi niya, anong sinasabi niyong suppression of freedom of expression or journalism? Yung Rappler tumatakbo pa and you get a lot of eyes every month. You even report every month and you even what? You're still operating. So that means there's still journalism here. But for me, there is responsible journalism and there is, fake and just, a negative journalism. Okay, Stephen, continue.
Well, who would want to be North Korea, right? In the end, the Philippines is also living under a climate of fear and violence. In fact, when I last interviewed...
Ito yung masakit sa sinabi niya. Sa totoo lang nasasaktan ako dito. Sorry, Maria Ressa, no? But you should not talk in behalf of the Philippines because what have you done? Why would you say that we are living in fear? Sa panahon ngayon, we don't need those comments. Girl, come on. You're very intelligent. I know that. You're kind-hearted. You're a very nice person. But why would you do this? If you have a complaint, so why don't you go directly to the government and write a letter? That means there's hidden agenda on this. Am I right? But you have the right to do it. Okay, let's continue.
President Duterte, when he was already president, I was one of 4 journalists he gave an interview to in December of 2016.
See, one of 4 journalists, and he allowed you to interview him. But he doesn't know that you're up to something. Poor Mr. President. Okay, go on, Maria Ressa.
I asked him that specifically. I said, Mr. President, now that you're in charge of actually protecting the Constitution, is it necessary to use violence? And he said, yes. He
said yes because alam naman natin, the propaganda of our president is to fight drugs. Marami akong kaibigan na nalulong dyan, nasira ang buhay, nasira ang pamilya, maraming nasaktan. Oh my gosh, if massacre all over because of drugs. Don't you call that violence, Maria Ressa? Di ba violence yon? So how should you go to war if you're not gonna use the word violence? How would you do it? Are you gonna treat these drug lords or drug users to be a baby? Like they matter so much? Yes, they do. Their life matters so much. Paano naman yung mga naging victims nila? Diba?
Said it's necessary to use violence and fear. So while you see what looks like a multitude of voices, imagine that those voices also have a Damocles sword hanging over their heads.
Wow, she's using a logical example that doesn't really make sense. She's, as you can see, she's thinking, she's making a pause. Because when you know what you're saying, when your conviction is for real, you're not gonna think, dire-diretso dapat yan. She's trying to go around the interview. That's how she's doing it. Anyway, we're gonna skip to the next question of Stephen. Okay, so let's do this next question. Stephen, go ahead.
hard talk, so I have to take seriously the charges against you, because as
absolutely.
you've indicated that the libel is the least of it. You still face allegations of, my goodness, what a list: fraud, tax evasion, receiving money from the CIA. I mean, you could be in court for years and years to come.
But for me, yeah, masyado siyang maraming cases talaga, and let's just face it. Siguro marami din dyan na dapat makasuhan na hindi natin alam. Pero siya lang yung lumabas, ibig sabihin, there is proof and strong proof for these cases. But I just hope Maria Ressa will be able to go through all this. Anyway, Stephen, go ahead.
Well, the only thing I can say is that these charges, the 8 criminal charges I'm facing, fall into 3 buckets. The first is cyber libel. The second is securities fraud. And in that, we'll throw in foreign ownership or foreign control, something violating something called the anti-dummy law. And then the third is tax evasion. And again, just like the first case, we were charged with tax evasion about 6 months after we received an award from the government for being a top corporate taxpayer.
Okay, let me just clarify that. Yeah, thank you for that, Maria Ressa, for the award. Congratulations. But I guess that happened not on the regime of Duterte. You received the award from the previous president. So by that time, it's a different thing. We don't know if that's real or not. If it's real, they should come out, they should give proof, and then wala naman ibang pwedeng ikaso sa'yo about those tax evasions. If there is really none, if really paying for it, why will you be scared? So I'm with you with that. And let's proceed again. Maybe I'll skip this and go to the next question of Stephen.
The second one is, do people care? Yes. And I can see that just based on what's happened. And I think this in particular in 2023, things have happened. We've had a pandemic, the lockdown. We are just in our 14th week of a very security-driven, militaristic lockdown.
Hello? Oh my goodness. Sino bang gusto mong mag-implement ng lockdown? Kayo? The military are there. They are the frontliners. They're away with their families. Bakit naman you're just basta makasira lang? You're not thinking about also this military people are human beings also. That they're sacrificing their lives to be in front of the COVID-19 pandemic. They don't eat, they don't sleep. They are on the street to protect everyone. Yun lang. Period. Okay. Stephen, I like this next question of Stephen. Let's go watch this.
Approves still of President Duterte's campaign against illegal drugs. They still seem to favor him despite all of the controversy about his latest anti-terror law, which you and others have described as a fundamental threat to freedom of expression.
That's the third one, right? That's the third one I was going to say, this anti-terror bill.
You have to get real in a way. Everything you say about what Duterte is doing is not deterring a really big majority of Filipinos from giving him their backing.
I think you have to look at the surveys and actually talk to the people who do the surveys.
Grabe naman. So these survey companies, they will only interview 1,000. That's the maximum. And then that 1,000 will represent the whole Philippines. We are 110 million. And these surveys, they're making money, but I don't know if they're doing it with credibility. Okay? Of course, there are legitimate ones, but that doesn't mean that 1,000 represents the whole country. All right?
Right.
Interesting question.
Now,
and I tell you what that plants in my mind, a different idea about fear. Maybe for you, and let's be honest, for a relatively elite personality living in a nice part of Manila with perhaps more security than most Filipinos, it is easy for you to focus on the threats to freedom which you feel and the fear you talk about. What about the Filipinos whose fear is much more street level. It's much more about the insecurity. And your Rappler website has made a point of investigating the drugs war that Duterte has initiated for the last 3-4 years. But the drugs war, according to most Filipinos, has made their streets safer. Yes, they look at the fact that hardly any security personnel have been prosecuted for egregious use of violence, but they also look at the fact that thousands of drug dealers have been taken off the streets, and they like that.
I think that's definitely the narrative, but if you dig deeper into the surveys, number one, and this is...
Oh my gosh, she's always directing her answers to dig deeper in the survey. It's always the survey. So as you can see, if you're gonna see the comments of various comments on this hard talk, you go check it on YouTube. You're gonna see all the comments, lahat doon negative, and it's against Maria Ressa. I'm sorry, Maria, but that's how the Filipinos seeing things. We are not robots. We are not trolls. I really like the way you do business. I really like the way you speak. With very smart. But sometimes I don't know what is in your heart. I know you these cases, but you're not answering the questions of Stephen directly.
Final thought then. I'm very mindful that you returned to the Philippines from the United States after the People Power Revolution of, I believe it was 1986, and you made your life in the Philippines after that. And there was so much hope around then of a different kind of politics in your country. Here's what one Filipino lawyer who moved to Australia recently has written, Jason Lamchek. He says, in terms of corruption, the post-people power governments became indistinguishable from the Marcos regime. The only difference was the rhetoric of human rights and democracy, which people have increasingly come to regard as a sham. Isn't that the truth? That Duterte is in power and, quote unquote, so successful because the post-people power politics of the Philippines simply failed the people?
I think I would agree that post-people power was a failure. We had endemic corruption. We replaced one set of leaders with another who then created their own. I mean, we've always said there are 8 oligarchical families, but the difference is this, right? The trickle-down effect didn't trickle down. There was a perfect storm, and this happened globally. This is part of the reason you're...
Again, binanggit na naman niya yung buong mundo. Stephen is only asking about the situation in the Philippines. Na sinabi ng lawyer, sa itatagalog ko lang sa pagkakaintindi ko, sinabi niya, kaya ang mga tao sa Pilipinas ay ganyan dahil nga nag-fail yung revolution na nangyari sa EDSA noong 1996, which wala pang kinalaman doon si Duterte. Tapos sinabi mo, you agree, and then it failed, and binanggit mo na naman kasi pinalitan na naman siya ng mga bagong set of leaders. Siyempre, kasi election tayo, di ba, Maria Ressa? So if there's an election, the people have the chance to choose who they want. Nagkataon lang na noong 2016, the people wanted drastic change in the leaders of the country. Everyone has a chance, right?
So we have to end, but I'm just thinking, never mind the threat of prison now hanging over your head, you continue this fight.
It's not just about prison. The journey is the battle, because I think there's so much more at stake. If it was just me, I would, I'd be quiet. Why not? But there's so much at stake for us right now. I became a journalist in 1986, and I'm a journalist today. I'm at my most senior, and I want to make sure that I do the right thing for democracy, for journalism.
Okay, so that's the end. Yeah, Maria Ressa, you're really a good journalist. My hands are up to you, and it shows naman that you've grown Rappler. Because I remember the early days of Rappler when you were just blogging. Pero ngayon, kasi siguro dahil hindi nyo gusto yung gobyerno na natin, hinahanapan nyo ng butas lahat. At alam naman ng mga Pilipino yan, simula nung nagkaroon ng social media, malaking tulong ito. At hindi rin ako naniniwala na nakontrol ng social media ang election kasi nasa tao pa din yan at meron tayong machine na nagko-control niyan. So, that's just my point. But you know what, Maria Ressa, I am praying for you and the whole Rappler for your safety, for everything, and that I am praying for to the Lord na sana it will send some clarification in your heart on how you're gonna get through this. So mga kababayan ko, pasensya na kayo. I'm not pro Maria Aresa, but I just want to be fair. She's also a human being, and she deserves to be, to be prayed for.